Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, management consultant turned humanitarian leader Ed Ma sits down with me in Palos Verdes, California to talk about his inspiring efforts to provide medical and humanitarian support to Ukraine through his foundation, Ed's Friends. Over the last year, Ed and his foundation have delivered over $500,000 of medical supplies and 30 ambulance and medical transport vehicles directly to Ukraine through his network of business partners, donors, close friends, and family. Ed talks about the importance of education, setting goals, and provides advice to those that must choose between their career and their passion. Ed Ma has a fascinating and inspirational story. Born and raised in Los Angeles, he earned his bachelor's degree from UCLA and his master's degree in the International Studies at the University of Pennsylvania's Lauder Institute and his MBA from the Wharton Business School. After his time at UCLA, Ed joined the Peace Corps and served for 2 years in eastern Ukraine. He has said to me many times that the Peace Corps was the hardest job he ever loved. He learned Russian and made many lifelong friends and business contacts. After the Peace Corps, he returned to Ukraine for 10 years where he immersed himself into entrepreneurship. Ed's life changed on February 24th, 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine. Ed began sharing humanitarian and medical perils on social media of his close friends and family in Ukraine. Almost immediately, Ed's U.S. network of friends and family began to provide him direct support to help wherever he could. This was the beginning of the foundation called Ed's Friends. If you're interested, I put more information in the show notes at troyedgar.com. I hope you enjoy it. I really appreciate you being here. How are you doing today, bud?
Pretty good, Troy. Really good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. It means a lot that you'd come on the show, and I'm really looking forward for our listeners to be able to hear your story. So this is going to be great.
Well, thanks for the opportunity, Troy.
Yeah. So I guess starting out, at the very beginning, I will be talking a little bit in the open to give a description about your story, kind of a high level summary, but to kind of introduce yourselves a little bit yourself to the listeners, if you wouldn't mind, give us a perspective of after growing up here in Los Angeles and kind of the origin story that takes you from LA to eventually over to the Peace Corps.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in LA and been here, from elementary school up to college. So I went to UCLA, your favorite school, Troy.
Oh my God. Yeah. I knew that and I still have you on the show. Being a USC guy, but no, thank you.
Yeah. So early on, even as a college student, and probably before, I always had a dream to see the world. I hadn't gone out of California all too much, and I wanted to see the world as a Peace Corps volunteer, not just to go on vacation, but really learn about a part of the world and learn a language and have it become part of me.
So when you get done and you take a little bit of time after college, I've had a lot of friends that came more in the Peace Corps when I was at DHS, especially in federal government. There was a lot of folks that go directly into federal service out of the Peace Corps. But question for you, you get ready to go in the Peace Corps. Where do you end up and how does that happen? Does the place pick you or do you pick the place?
That's a really good question, Troy. So Peace Corps was in about 70 countries at the time. And you don't really get to pick the country where you want to go. You can tell them a couple of regions of the world that you want to be in. And, I said South America, Asia, or Central Europe, and they ended up placing me in Ukraine.
Oh, okay. So you end up over there in Ukraine and don't know anybody. What are So now you're in the Peace Corps, and you're looking at this. I mean, tell me, what are the conditions? You get there and what?
Well, Peace Corps was probably, I mean, it's a volunteer thing, but it's probably one of the hardest things. What they say, it's the hardest job you will ever love. And I was able to really expand my mind and my horizons. And you're basically thrown out of a plane with a parachute, and you land with no help, with no support. You don't have any friends there. There are no contacts. You don't even speak the language, and you don't know how anything works. It's very different than America. So I would say it was a huge learning experience. I got to learn how to speak the Russian language, which is what they spoke in the eastern part of the country where I was. If I was in the West, I would have learned Ukrainian. I learned about the cultural mores, and most importantly, I developed a lot of really great relationships and friendships for life.
Right. So, you're over there for 2 years. You get kind of taken in, from what I hear, through kind of a host family. You start to build these unbelievable relationships. Probably not only, I mean, it's almost taking you back to basics. You're there to do a mission, but you got to learn English, from English to Russian. That you've got to, figure out where things are in the city, and then you've got to kind of figure out how does that culture go. You talk about the language, the people, but you also, as a entrepreneuring type of guy, you look around, you're like, I'm getting ready to finish my 2 years here in the Ukraine. What were your thoughts? I mean, were you thinking opportunity, or were you thinking, hey, this may be the last time I'm laying the mic down, I'm out of here?
Yeah, I went from not being able to buy milk in the language to thinking I'm going to start a business, and I really want to stay in the country in order to run a company. When I was done with Peace Corps after 2 years, no, I was definitely dead set on remaining, spending the next part of my life trying to build a business in the country.
Wow. So you get done with the Peace Corps, you come back to the United States, and you obviously there's a contemplation point, but your story kind of takes the big swing back to the Ukraine for 10 years. And the way that I see the story laid out, you and I've had a lot of talks over some bourbons. Your story kind of had two sections: the first 5 years, and then there was a break. Something pretty unique happened, and then you had your second 5 years, and then there was a big break, and you kind of ended up back. Fill in the dots there.
Right. So you're definitely right. There were 2 5-year periods. The first one was really about learning, finishing my learning process, the language, really getting a more of a handle on how businesses run. I ended up starting 2 small businesses, keeping the risk level low. Learning how to operate in this post-communist structure, and finding out the risks and the pitfalls that can be associated with doing business there. At the end of those 5 years, I realized I hit a wall. Although the country was very optimistic, the government was very Western leaning. They had got rid of the visa requirements for Europeans, so the country was opening up to the West. I wanted to be a part of it. But I hit a wall because I realized I didn't have quite the level of business education that I needed to go to the next level and operate a larger business. So I sought more education.
So let's talk about that, because that was fascinating. You're over there and you're thinking, I need, and that's what the show is about trying to use the building blocks. And so you're like, look, I don't have it, I'm getting it. And then you apply to Penn, you get into a renowned school in international business there. Talk about that, and then you end up back in the Ukraine.
Yeah, so I spent my time working on my small businesses at the end of those 5 years, and applying to business school, studying for the GMAT, making applications. Wharton had a program called the Lauder program. It combines a business education with international studies, and I was able to also focus those studies on Russian-speaking countries like Ukraine. So that fit my goals exactly, and it was the perfect place for me to launch a business like I wanted to.
That's awesome. So you get done, you head back in, and now you got a head of steam. I'm not fully picking up on your story where you and I intersect, but I definitely seen at that point you started swinging bigger. You got out of the small businesses, you started putting together people that want to do business in the Ukraine, and you as a Sherpa, and a connection point into Ukraine. You start lining up financing, getting international relationships, possibly leveraging your Wharton connections. So you end up, when I remember you had an energy company, or you were getting ready, and that was going. So for the first 3 or 4 years, that thing, it's real.
So alternative energy was a big thing, and I was thinking of different options on what kind of business. I had friends who were also former Peace Corps in Ukraine like me, and also from UPenn, and we joined forces and decided to launch a solar panel manufacturing company. So we ended up setting up full-scale production in Western Ukraine.
Good. And so as we kind of get to the end of that 10-year period, things are not seeming so safe. And this is where I start to kind of pick up some signals of stuff going on. I've worked with your sister. She was working with one of my companies. And she's telling me the story about this hero brother of hers, and that he was basically doing some unbelievable stuff over in Ukraine, but she was worried about you, and she was like going on. And I was like, at that point, it's like, I'm not sure I'm supposed to be doing something here, but the stories kept getting worse. And so from your side, what is leading up to this? And maybe at that point, we're starting to get to where we first have our contact.
Yeah, life for me was going great. I was doing what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be. I met a nice woman who I was getting married to. I was running a multinational company. However, revolutionary type of things started going on, and that operating a business in that environment ended up not being sustainable.
That was like 2015 time period.
That was 2014. So that whole year of 2000, from the end of 2013 to the start of 2015, we were really just trying to keep things together. And it was the year that Euromaidan, which was a revolution, a civil protest, began. That led into the Revolution of Dignity, and those activities led to my return to the U.S., which my sister had a large part of. She was actually, very worried about me, like you said, and she had been working with you, and that's how I got in touch with you and your firm.
So that picks up. We end up kind of, we had went through kind of virtual interview process. I know you had interviewed with my company, and you were also looking at working at one of our clients. Mm-hmm. And so you come here and basically starting fresh, and really to kind of take that story to its fullest. So you end up, and that was about the 2015 time period.
2015, yeah.
Yeah. And so, just a great run. I mean, you're doing all this unbelievable work. Some of the skill sets that you have for consulting were pretty extraordinary. You talk about, the personality types that's required, when you're out there actually dealing in really tough situations, when, companies decide that they're going to bring people in to help them out on pretty significant things. There's a lot of change that's going on. And so, I always tell people in consulting that you can be the best consultant, but if you don't have the personality to be able to kind of match in the bedside manner, you just won't fit the requirement for the client, and the client can decide, hey, look, this person just doesn't fit here. And so, someone like yourself, you have a great personality. You're somebody that you acclimate, maybe it's your Ukrainian Peace Corps experience, but, wherever you're at, you kind of acclimate to where you're at. And you become the guy that on both sides, the consulting team and the clients, kind of gravitate to on a more personal basis, which once you get to that level on these tough jobs, I think it makes those tough jobs a lot easier. And again, Ed, I think that skill set is something that you did pick up being over, and through this experience that you've had to make you such a effective consultant.
Yeah, well, being in the Peace Corps, being in Ukraine definitely taught me a lot about how to deal with different types of people, different types of personalities, and getting a job done, even though there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of things you don't know. And all of that goes into play when you're a consultant and you're trying to learn a new business and learn a new group, a new team, and how to succeed in that kind of environment.
Great. So, everything is going great. I know you and I had some interactions kind of going back and forth. Spent some time in Dallas together.
Definitely.
Yeah, and some good guitar times and stuff back there. Not only just hard work, but some opportunity to kind of get through that. But it ends up February 24th, 2022.
Yeah, that was the day that changed my life. Something definitely happened on that day. And if there was ever a watershed moment in someone's life, that was the one for me.
Yeah. So, yeah, for the listeners, if you can, just talk a little bit about what that was, just so that people kind of have an understanding of really what we were dealing with there.
So in the early parts of 2021, there were a lot of Russian artillery and tanks and armaments amassing at the northern border of Ukraine. And on February 24th of 2022, that's when the tanks started rolling across the border from Russia into Ukraine. And, a lot of people in Ukraine, I'm sure everybody in Ukraine had a rude awakening that day. And for me, it was a day that changed my life.
Yeah. So, at that point, really important time in your life is you're starting to hear about people that you built these great relationships with for 12 years. You've really kind of been living this very international lifestyle. You've made great friends over there. You've now been, over back in the U.S. for almost 7 years. Still going over, if I remember right, every January, every New Year's Eve, spending in Ukraine. You and I, a few times, you invited me to potentially come over there with you.
Yeah, we actually started doing preliminary plannings, and it would have been great if none of this other stuff started happening. I'm sure you'd be right there with me, having a piece of pork fat and having a vodka shot.
Yeah. Well, then, obviously, situation in Ukraine gets serious, and as you're starting to, I know you and I are talking, and you're like, "Hey, Troy, I had somebody that meant a lot to me. Stuff was happening very quickly. I know it went from seeing stuff to you're feeling like I got to do something. I'm starting to feel like I really want to try and help. And because of your personality, you're a networker, your connections, you start indirectly helping and getting involved with some people and trying to get stuff lined up. And then pretty soon more starts coming your way. And there's this sentiment of really trying to help people. And everybody knows you and your story in Ukraine. So you're kind of a brand for the country. And the next thing you know is like it's becoming overwhelming. And I remember you calling me and saying, "Hey, Troy, I think I need to start some sort of a nonprofit or something because I'm getting so many donations and stuff. I'm not really sure, how we need to go about that." And I know you and I talked and said, "Ed, you need to get a foundation set up and a 501c3. You need to kind of get some of this moving, and that way you can get organized around this." But to talk a little bit about the establishment of Ed's Friends in Ukraine.
Yeah, sure. It was really a grassroots movement, right? So it went from people just dropping off things at my house that they knew that I was stuffing suitcases and flying over to Ukraine to drop off supplies, to people sending me money. "Hey, Ed, what's your PayPal? What's your Venmo? I want to send you some cash." It went from just really that type of operation. It's very informal to incorporating a nonprofit organization, which I did in the U.S. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we focus on Ukraine. And it's really it started with my friends in the U.S. here. Doing what we can to help all of my friends and loved ones in Ukraine. So naturally, we called it Ed's Friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the thing about that, I think your business sense kicked in, and pretty soon, when I would talk to you, I'm like, "Hey, Ed, so specifically, what are you focused on?" And you're like, "Troy, I've got these goals. I'm focused right now on trying to get medical equipment and supplies. I'm also focused on trying to either get ways to transport people that have been hurt or injured or shot in the Ukraine, potential ambulances." So talk about that, because I thought that was amazing. Like within the first year, you told me, "Hey, I'm going to do that." Then you put together that goal and you accomplished some pretty significant stuff.
Yeah, of course, we tried everything to help in every kind of way in the beginning, and eventually we kind of knew things to focus on. Um, there was a lot of wounded people, of course, civilians and military personnel, and they're unable to get to help. So it became quite a real need for people to get ambulances or some sort of transport to get them to a hospital or stabilization point. And that wasn't being provided really enough by the international aid that's coming in, because that focused more on big ticket items. But, a used car is very useful over there, something like a used ambulance. We ended up just in the first 8 months after the start of this full-scale invasion to bring over 30 used ambulances and other evacuation vehicles. And we also started to bring a lot of medical supplies that gets donated to our organization. So Ed's Friends received and brought and delivered over, I would say we're approaching about $500,000 worth of medical supplies and surgical instruments that we bring to the hospitals over there. And most of it we bring personally to doctors and hospitals we know.
Yeah, anybody that's out there that's curious about Ed Ma and his social media, if you want to see some pretty interesting airport pictures of you unloading a ton of suitcases, you're probably the airline's worst nightmare. I fly almost every week, and believe me, I wouldn't want what you're dealing with there.
Well, I never knew that there really is no limit to how many suitcases they let you bring. I thought, you can pay extra for a couple of suitcases, but they max you out. But next thing I know, I'm having 15 suitcases and, things like that.
Yeah. So Ed, you get you get to a point right now, and now kind of the big cause right now. And I think maybe just to share with the listeners, because you and I have talked a little bit about what your focus is trying to get not only more medical supplies and get up towards $1 million worth of medical supplies and equipment over there, but you're really focused on a big delivery of some of the ambulances and the activity that's going on there. So could you talk about your goals for the time coming up?
Yeah, we're really trying to focus our activities and get funding and to bring within the next year 60 more ambulance evacuation vehicles. Procure them in Europe and deliver them to eastern Ukraine, where they're very much needed.
Yeah, good deal. And then lastly, and this is probably where we switch out of Ed running Ed's Friends to kind of back to anybody that listens to this that ever wanted to kind of follow a passion and where their heart is and try to weigh off, hey, I need to make some tough trade-offs as eventually you get to a point, very similar to me being in my community, serving city council and mayor for 12 years, you get to a point where you just love being able to give back and being able to be a part of something to help people, that starts to overshadow maybe some of your professional desires, and you get to this inflection point. And so I was just curious if you might be able to share with the listeners, people that get to that point and they got to make some hard decisions. It's like, look, I'm a super successful consultant. You're doing all this work in the Fortune 500. You can't keep this pace up with all of the work that's going on with Ed's Friends. It's actually become an entity, a going concern. What do you say to some of the listeners that are out there that now have that inflection point, and you really got to kind of think about, maybe not specific to Ed's Friends, but I mean, what goes through your mind, and how do you try to reconcile that?
Yeah, sometimes something happens in your life. For me, it was February 24th, and you really start digging deep into yourself and wondering what it is that is your calling in life, and if you're lucky enough to find it, you might, be able to pursue it. I'm finding myself balancing corporate work, a career that I'm, really proud of that I've built, and trying to continue building, and that combined with coordinating humanitarian aid to the people I care about who really need it. And I have this term, I call it's my work-war balance, and this is really what I'm dealing with every day. And I wake up every morning and I go to sleep every night, thinking, hey, I wish I can do more, and I think I can do more in order to help those I care about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the hard part, as both of us get a little bit older and more things attached to us that we care about, you really do start to have to do that reconciliation between this is my mission but these are my people, and previous episodes, I've talked a little bit about trying to get priorities of life and, kind of how you center yourself against things and put them into priorities, or what's the meaning of life. And so I think, it's really noble that you've been able to do all the things that you can do. And I think that the listeners will be very appreciative of the story of, also applying yourself to something. A guy from LA working his way through. I loved, the part where you talk about, you do these periodic reviews of like, where am I now and what else do I need? And sometimes you got to go get education. Sometimes you need more friends in your network. Sometimes you need to kind of just stay focused on what you're doing and go through the hard parts. And so, Ed, I think your story's been fascinating, and I'm so appreciative that you've been able to share that. And any last things that you would want to leave with the listeners based on everything and all this wisdom that you've gotten over the last couple of years working in your foundation?
Well, I'm not sure how much wisdom I've gained. I definitely have learned a lot about myself, and I have learned that I do find a lot of meaning in helping those that I love, and there's a lot of that needs to happen for me personally here in this conflict. Really, I would urge listeners to maybe find what they care about. For me, I think I found it, and for anybody who wants to help me, our cause, of course, that's very welcome too. And I would say if everybody tried to just help other people a little bit, I think it pays back.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Ed, I will make sure that I put all the information about your organization out there. So anybody's interested in the show notes, they can go to the website, check it out. And we're very appreciative. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking at those guitars over there on the other side of the room, and I'm thinking it might be time for a jam. So
we might have to jam our old Chan Chan jam and maybe pour a bourbon.
That
sounds pretty good to me.
Cool. Thank you, Ed. Thanks a lot. You take care, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Troy.
Okay. God bless. Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.